Mobility Rocks! Shared Mobility Rocks!
Welcome, Kampala! Welcome, hello! Hi! Hello!
My name is Anna, and we're here today in Kampala, Uganda. It's the capital city of Uganda, which is located in East Africa. And we are here today to talk about the rise of shared mobility in Kampala and its future. And I want to emphasize future. Our interest is really to look and see where this trend of shared mobility is going in our city. So I'm going to quickly tell you how this next 1.5 hours is going to go. And then I'm going to pass it off to my esteemed colleague, Emma Mbabazi, who's sitting with the red mask. And she's going to introduce all of our panelists. We have a guest of honor today from the Uganda Railways Corporation. His name is Stephen Wakasenze. He's sitting here in the blue mask. And then we have 4 members, either directors or leaders in transportation companies who have joined us today. And so they're going to talk about their experience in shared mobility and some of their visions for growth. But the most important person in the room might be this man standing in the gray shirt in the back. His name is Otim Joshua, and Joshua is a painter here in Kampala, and he focuses on studying the beauty and the complexity of environments. And we invite Joshua specifically today because we believe cities are an environment, and how transportation moves through a city says something about our ecosystem. And so while we're talking today, I want you all to keep an eye on Joshua and watch what he's doing. He's going to paint the vision of what we're speaking live. So at the end of this 1.5 hours, you're going to see the future of Kampala on his canvas in the back. So and my final note is that this event is organized by World Resources Institute, WRI. I work with WRI. I'm an urban mobility coordinator, and my colleague Emma also works with WRI. Our interest is designing and ensuring that cities are sustainable. So we understand that mobility has a big impact on how people live in cities, and we want to see mobility which is coordinated, which is connected, which is affordable, and which is safe. And so we work with governments around the world to try to ensure that. So with that, I'll pass it off to Emma.
Right. Thank you, Anna. As Anna said, my name is Emma. I'm a project specialist here in Kampala with the World Resources Institute. Before I go on to introduce the panel, I thought I'll do a brief background or a brief presentation on how far shared mobility has come in our city. Some things, a lot has changed, but also quite a bit has stayed the same. So we'll just go on to the presentation on shared mobility. On shared mobility in Kampala, its rise, and then we will go to our panel next to talk about its future. So we'll start from the 1950s and 60s. Uganda got its independence in 1962, but at the time, shared mobility in the 1950s and 60s was, the public transportation system in the city was characterized by, there was some formality in that we had the trains and buses, but there was also quite a bit of informality that was characterized by the taxis that you see there. Most of them were 5-seater Peugeots, and they were not regulated, but it's just citizens that saw a space in the market and decided to provide this. Most other people walked and cycled around the city or had their private cars. There were also train services, as I said, but within the city, we had one that went just outside the city center to a place called Port Bell, but most of the other train services went to further away towns like Kasese, Lira, and also to Kenya, like places like Kisumu and Eldoret. Now, moving on to the 1970s and the 80s, at the time we had two public transport companies operating buses. One was called the Uganda Transport Company, and the other was called People's Transportation Company. As you can see, those buses are written on UTC. But in the early 1970s, at the time the Kampala City Council decided to start charging a levy for those 5-seater taxis that I talked about. And it was not a way of regulating, but a way of the City Council also saw an opportunity to earn money from people who are doing business within the city. And we also find that these private bus companies at the time in 1972 were then nationalized. And then the 1970s and early 80s were tumultuous for Uganda. So moving on to about 1986, the bus companies were recapitalized, more fleet was added on in order to try and boost the public transportation system. But then we find that when we get to the 1990s, Uganda in the early 1990s was going through a structural transformation. And so these bus companies, as most public transport providers, they're not money-making ventures, so they became insolvent and they were scrapped. And that left a space for informal public transport, others might call it paratransit, to arise. And that's so the rise of the boarders, as well as the minibus taxis. The minibus taxis in the 1990s started as 8-seater taxis, but quickly moved on to 14-seater taxis that you see there. Actually, that space is the same space that you saw the smaller 5-seater Peugeots. We now call it the old taxi park. And in the last 20 years, so from 2000 onwards, because of this gap, we have seen the public transportation system in our city really boom in relation to borders. You will find from the graph that borders have really boomed from 2003 to 2014. We now have over 300,000 borders in our city. We also have a lot of minibus taxis. You find that in 2015, there were over 16,000 commuter taxis and transporting over 80% of the population. We did have the train services resume, which had stopped during the tumultuous times, the passenger train services in particular, because the train services here do the freight services, and that's what brings in the money. But in 2015, we did see them resume, and they added another line in 2018. But what we have seen really rising from 2015 onwards is the rise of technology-enabled mobility services, so lift shares, ticketing services from your phone, booking services from your phone, and this is where we might see the future of shared mobility in the city. At the moment, while those kinds of companies and, for example, the railway service in its nature has a little bit of formality, not a little bit of it, because the routes are always set, unlike roads. They are operating in a largely informal sector. And so we'll be trying to tease out how we can start to work together and see how to formalize, regulate, make a public transportation or shared mobility a lot more reliable and a lot more integrated. So that's a little brief history. Now, let me introduce to you Stephen Wakasenza. He's the Chief Commercial and Concession Officer at Uganda Railways Corporation. Stephen, welcome to Shared Mobility Rocks, Kampala studio.
Thank you.
We're really glad to have you. Can you just speak a little bit about Uganda Railways Corporation's work? We know you do both freight and passenger services, so talk a little bit in general about your work, and then tell us how your passenger services have developed and where you see them going in the next few years.
Thank you, Emma. I'm glad to be here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, viewers. I'm called Stephen Wakasenza. I'm the Chief Commercial and Concession Officer at Uganda Railways. Uganda Railways is a government parastatal. It's under the Ministry of Works and Transport. So we are regulated by Works and Transport. And we have a number of market segments. We do freight, we do passenger, we do warehousing, we do real estate. But the topic of today is shared mobility. So emphasis will be on passenger. As you rightly put it, the service, passenger service, was not in Uganda, had been stopped for over 19 years. So in 2015, the service was reintroduced in Uganda. But why was it reintroduced? It was to cater for a public good requirement, the congestion in the city. And as we are doing this, we don't do that in isolation. We do it with KCCA, with other local governments, with ONO, DG, so that we get a service that can serve the public. The story of passenger service is very interesting. That in December 2015, when we started the service, we ran it for a month and we moved 1,805 people. Then we were running it empty. Why? Because the population needed to be certain that there is a reliable service, it's on time, and it is new. As we speak, ladies and gentlemen, we are moving close to 4,000 people per day. It has been affected by COVID. Obviously, we had to scale that to half. But that is the service we have. And we have a service with a limited rolling stock. What we took over, we have 5 coaches. The capacity of a coach is between 120 to 150 ridership. And we have 5 of them. So from 2015, we have been using this and we are engaging partners to find a way of increasing the capacity because we are running the service between Kampala and Lima. These are only 12 kilometers. We are not cutting across the city. So our plans are to come up with a bigger project. We have already done a feasibility study with, this was financed by EU, if you can focus on that. So the feasibility study, what is it doing? It's informing us on the need of this service. And from a World Bank report, I think it was 2015, it was identified that the country loses close to $800 million due to congestion. And there are other benefits. It's safe, it is timely, the productivity time that would have been lost can be channeled anywhere else, somewhere else. And environmentally, it is a good service. So we have been running that, and the plans are to expand across the city, whereby we're looking at running the service from the Kampala Namalve, Kampala Chengera, Bujuko, Kampala Korea. So overall, that's what we are offering, and it has been welcomed by the general public.
Thank you, Stephen, for that overview. Just a brief follow-up question. So the rail has particular routes and it goes and stops at particular stations, but we do also need to make connections for fast and last mile connections. How might you see Uganda Railways operation integrating with different modes in the city or even in the other towns that you go to? Because you go to Namambe, which is in Mukono, and you might be expanding to, where is Chengera? Is that Wakiso?
That is Wakiso.
Yes, you might be expanding to another district, Wakiso. How might you see URC, as you said, you work with the other city councils, integrating with these other modes to make the transportation a bit more reliable and a bit more seamless?
Okay, it's a good question. We can't operate in isolation. If you look at our network, it crosses a number of local districts. For Greater Kampala metropolitan area, we are talking about Kampala, Lviv, Mukono, all those are included in there. So, for example, when we were doing the feasibility study, these were key stakeholders which we contacted. But still, access to the service is a key issue. For example, when we drop people in Namam, some walk home, some take border, some are picked by vehicles. So in the feasibility study, we are looking at setting up park and ride services. Park and ride services is where, assuming I stay in Mukono or Gazi, I drive to Mukono station, I park my vehicle there, take train to Kampala, do whatever I have to do in the day. In the evening, I drive back, pick my vehicle. That is the connectivity that we are looking at with the access. It's very important that the people using the service can easily get to the station or platform, transit onto a train service, and later in the evening they do use the same approach. The park and ride service, facility is being used by rail all over. But when we look at Uganda, we are looking at one in Mukono, one in Chengera, one in Bujuko, one in Port Bell, so that this kicks in and people can use intermodal service. But also, as we talk about mobility, as you see the railway access, daily there are people using it and walking home. So we are even looking at the bigger plan where we can pave certain sections of the railway. It's a benefit to us in that it protects the railway from encroachment, and it's important that the reserve is available for safety reasons. So that is how we are looking at connecting with other users. But most importantly, our colleagues here, Andrew and Co, need to come in and also help us, because you have the infrastructure, the permanent way, which we call the railroad, on which the train moves. You have the locomotives and coaches when they actually get them, but we need the connectivity, like Nokia. These apps need to help us connect the people on time, in full, literally, for them to use the service. So we are looking at also that route and using other avenues to communicate through social media and others. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Stephen. You've actually preempted the following discussion. You talked about, what did you call it? The car.
Park and ride.
No, the train car.
Okay, the rail reserve.
The train car takes about 150 people.
Okay, the coach.
The coach.
The difference between there are wagons and coaches. Coaches take people.
Right.
So the ridership is between 120 and 150, both sitting and standing. Why both sitting and standing? Because they're short distances we are looking at.
Okay. So we've looked at a mass transit system which can carry in just one coach 150 people, and we have just 5 coaches at the moment. And now we'll go to what we have in Kampala as the next, or at least what we have here as the mode that will carry the next number of people, and that is the minibus taxis. I'd like to introduce Andrew Lima, who is the CEO of Easy Matatu. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us at Shared Mobility Kampala studio. We'll just have a brief introduction about Easy Matatu's work from this video. Please watch.
Accounts for 70 to 100% of public transport, up to 30% of commuters in Africa have to use minibus taxis to get to work and basically to live life. When you come to Kampala, Uganda, nearly 100% of public transport is provided informally. The most prevalent mode of informal public transport in sub-Saharan Africa in Kampala is the minibus taxi. These minibus taxis carry up to 14 passengers, but in some instances they carry up to 25 passengers. In Kampala, over 50% of commuters have to use these minibus taxis, and yet these minibus taxis are often dirty, unreliable, inconsistent, and inequitable. Easy Matatu is reforming the informal public transport sector in Africa. Starting in Kampala, Uganda, we are working with minibus taxis and providing training and organization to a very chaotic industry. We harness the existing informal minibus taxi drivers and we provide training to them. Using our mobile app, commuters can book seats on scheduled rates, moving along specific routes. We also provide an option for commuters who do not have smartphones. We provide a toll-free number that any commuter can make a call to and book a seat on an easy Matatu operated minibus. We're currently operating 18 trips per day on 3 different routes, and we have served over 2,500 commuters in the last year that we have been operating. Easy Matatu currently maintains a staff of 15 part-time and full-time people, and we're looking at scaling our operations across Kampala, Uganda. Easy Matatu was also able to be instrumental during the COVID-19 lockdown here in Kampala, where we were able to provide transportation to health workers at Mukono General Hospital using our Easy Matatu operated minibuses. Easy Matatu has also partnered with Toyota Uganda to provide staff transport for their employees. We have online payment system. You can pay using your mobile money, you can pay using your Airtel money. So all you need to do is you just load your money in your Easy Matatu wallet so that you can use it.
It has been easy for me given that I work near where they park rather than going to a cafe and then having to walk. Now you see that allowing border, so it's a bit tricky. So Easy Matatu is like a lifesaver.
Okay, I'll quickly introduce the rest of our panelists before we go on to the panel discussion. So the next mode from a minibus taxi that is very common in Kampala, a bit smaller, is border borders. Let me introduce Ricky Rapper Thompson, co-founder and director at Safe Border, and we'll just view the work of Safe Border in this video.
You can wait.
And many forms of transport in Kampala. But there are lots of this because people didn't wear helmets.
The border industry is not organized in Kampala. The border doesn't have customers as safe drivers.
The other person tried to find the kind of an state just because it was running fast. It had no helmet. At least 40% of cases in road traffic accidents are due to border injuries. It was found that 1% use helmets, and 50% of the patients who are admitted with head injury die. The large percentage of the hospital budget is spent treating these patients with injuries. If border riders wear helmets and follow road traffic regulations, we will have a decrease in the number of injuries and the severity of these injuries.
Safe Border is a market-based tourism project in Kampala. We provide drivers in our community with trainings in good quality companies. We help customers find safe border drivers using mobile apps. Safe Border is a community of safe border drivers which provides training in road safety, bike maintenance, and bus aid.
safe water is very good for us. It's safe. The mobile application, the user finds the safe water driver near his solution. The safe water receives the notification and meets the customer. Then the customer can enjoy the safe water.
Yeah.
Right, that was one wiki wrap-up, telling you firsthand about the border. And now I will introduce Executive Director, First African Bicycle Information Organization, Fabio for short. It's a bicycle share organization. Najiba Patesi, wait to the audience, and we will have a brief about Fabio's work in the next video.
Fabio, you can do the voiceover.
Time we evolved to advocacy for non-motorized transport. So a lot of our work rotates around a bicycle as a tool of transformation, but also a tool of mobility to access socio-economic services. We are working at building a new created city, and the culture setting is quite favorable. And the council currently has a new project turning one of the streets into a cycle lane. So we are happy that the council came to us, and that is a good start to bicycle planning. But we are also an organization working towards introducing electric bikes in Uganda. So by the end of this year, around August, we expect 80 bicycles. So basically, as an organization, we have started an intervention around the bicycle rental. We are happy that we receive quite a lot of people that want to go to work. We receive quite a lot of people that want to take their produce to the market. We also have tourists that want to visit different tourism areas within Jinja City. Getting a bicycle is actually very simple. One, you must have an ID, a national ID if you are Ugandan. You must have a passport if you're not Ugandan. So once the bicycle is returned, we then give back the ID or the passport to the person. The bicycle comes with a lock to enable security of the bicycle wherever the person is taking this bicycle. We realize that there is an influx of motorcycles within cities. But despite the fact that motorcycles are increasing, there are quite a number of people, or many people are still using bicycles and walking within city spaces. Now, when you look at our multimodal transport master plan, it states that 2.5 million people in Kampala, around Kampala, walk or cycle on a daily basis. It also adds space for about 8 million trips by the year 2040, which is quite a lot, which means the need to invest in cycling and walking within the city. And this is what brings our bicycle rental program. So basically, Pablo is a non-motorized transport promoter in Uganda.
Right, so that is what Fabio does. Our last panelist, but certainly not the least, is does not deal with public transportation actually. Ernest, of course, the CEO of Safari Share, but what their service does is to help to increase occupancy in private cars. Ernest, if you could wave to people watching us, and we'll have an overview of Safari Share's work in the next video.
interest to get along.
Can you go backwards for something short?
Once you download the app onto your phone, just say where you are and where you want to go. And then the supply chain drivers to approach you at that time, and I have one look at their options. So simple, just like that. And then just one. It's gratitude. So the drivers are going away already. It's a flourish, right? We have the whole city and the whole country covered. That's right. Upcountry destinations too. So, if you have places to go, get the Safari Shop app now. Safari Shop.
Right. So now we all have an overview of some of the shared mobility modes that operate within our city. We shall start our discussion. And I'll first start with the issue of reliability, because I think every person on this panel is, we have all noted the informality in our public transportation system, but every person on this panel is doing their best to provide a reliable service. I'll direct this question mostly to Easy Matatu, as well as Ricky from Safe Border. What did you have to do, because you both talked about training of riders, and what did you have to do to make the modes that, because you're dealing with modes that we already had here in Kampala. What did you do differently to make your particular service reliable? We'll start with, let's start with Andrew.
Thank you, Emma. Pleasure to be here. Yeah, as you noted, it's a very informal industry, and training has been very crucial. When you look at the demographics of the people, say in the matatu industry, in the minibus taxi industry, which is very similar to the border industry, you have people who are largely undereducated, meaning they haven't had opportunities to go through the education system. They also earn very low income, so it means exposure is very low. So things like smartphones are a new thing for them, especially that's what we have seen in the minibus taxi industry. So training has been very crucial. Training and continuous mindset change to get them to understand that technology can make things easier, because a large, the biggest part of the reliability issue is around efficiency. It's not that there are not enough taxis, it's about how they're being used. For example, a taxi would spend 2 to 3 hours in the taxi park waiting to fill up. Yet on another side of town is a place where people are stranded. So you realize that it's an efficiency problem, and so we have to change their mindsets to get them to work using technology, because it makes the trips much easier and enables them to make more money. So yeah, that's been very fundamental for us.
Thank you, Andrew. Ricky?
Thank you so much, Emma. I think for us it was very clear, and myself being that I was in the industry, anything that is for the best of the people must involve the people and must be for the people. So of course we did a number of things, but first was to involve them in all the processes and every other thing and every other decision that we were doing. Because even when we talked about training them, it was then who suggested that there's a gap in the industry, because it's very clear that anyone can just buy a border and then start riding around the street. You'll be stopped on the way, and it can definitely become a border. So it was lack of that clarity in the industry. People do not know who is here to do a motorcycle taxi service and who is traveling from home to work and stuff like that. Given the bad reputation in the industry, we had to come together and build a community that was really focused on what was best for the industry. And then after building that community, we were now able to train our drivers and then continue to empower them. Because
Of course, after bringing them together and training them, they need to be economic feel as well. So it was very clear that having a clear brand that they associate to, given that in the industry, lots of other companies or lots of other individuals have used borders as moving billboards. It was now time for them to start promoting themselves as leaders in the industry, as people who are professional, as people who are here to serve the people of Kampala in the best way possible. So it was just about involving them and making them part and parcel of every decision that we brought on board. And that is what has brought the change that you see today. There is no stick that will change. There is no, so you can have all the laws and all the rules, but the reality is if people are not willing to embrace and appreciate the change, you will never see that. And today what we really see is that the safe borders can stop by the traffic light by themselves. They can wear the reflectors by themselves, and the reflectors that actually has their name. They can wear a helmet and carry a second one for a passenger. And all these things just happen automatically because people feel it is their responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ricky. And now I'll change gears a little bit and move to the bicycle. To be honest with you, Katesi, I am scared of cycling on Kampala roads. What do you think? I know you operate in Jinja, which is a city very close to Kampala. What do you think can be done in a place like Kampala? You live here, you know what Kampala is like. What might we start to do to get people cycling and feeling safe doing it?
Thank you, Emma. For starters, as a layperson, myself as Katesi, as much as I promote cycling, I cannot cycle in Kampala. So the starting point is to invest in infrastructure. Infrastructure that allows for people to feel safe, but that can also connect to the bigger, to the trains, to the matatus, so that someone can feel safe to ride their bicycles from home to a parking spot and then take off to public transport. So there must be connectivity between the major public transport and the NMT or the bicycles themselves. That is good. Then the other thing is security. How do we plan for the security of the bicycles? People are taking road signage in the night. So how do we plan better parking spaces so that people feel safe to leave their bicycle somewhere and go to take a matatu or whatever? So infrastructure, security, but above all, we need to seek public opinion. We need to involve the people in the planning. Because once you put infrastructure out of the blue and the people are not involved, you'll see. One time I was in a safe border meeting where the guys were excited about the green lines along Kororo. The border guys, they were excited that at least now we also have space for the motorcycles. Yet this is infrastructure meant for bicycles. So there must be investment in sensitizing people and also how to use the infrastructure that is put in place. So this is very important for me.
That's very interesting insights. Before I come to Safari Share, let me just get Stephen's opinion, because you did speak a bit about what URC is planning with park and rides, as well as walkways along the railway lines. How might you see the bicycle or bicycle transit integrated in these plans?
Thank you, Emma. I also agree with Jesse here. Riding in Kampala is a nightmare. But that said, we started a discussion on LMT, and we are in concept stage, whereby we identify a section of the railway reserve land. You know that rail has, at least in Ghana, minimum of 15 meters on either side. And for us to walk this journey, we need to partner. And this has even been raised in the Ministry of Works and Transport. And the area that we had identified is from Kampala to Namambe, whereby you pave the railway reserve, you have a walkway, you have a cycle lane, and the issue of educating the public is also key, that if a train is coming, you need to give way, so that you have a safe environment in which to ride. So as railway, we look at that, and we are planning in that direction. But also, when it comes to the cap and ride stations or platforms, looking at accessibility for ridership, rail ridership, that you have a place where you can have your bicycle, you can get amenities from there, so that from there you can go straight there. So as rail, that's the picture we're looking at. We're in engagement with the Ministry of Works on that. And I've met the Fabio team and them as well in the ministry discussing this. But what is important also is to actualize it. That's what we need. Probably given I have the mic now, I was requesting the schedule for the training to be displayed. During COVID, and given the adherence to SOPs, we are forced to reduce the number of ridership using the train from the 150 to 55 to 75. But we also introduced a route to Port Bell. So that is the schedule you can see. Kampala Namambe, we do 4 trips literally. Because of limitation of rolling stock, we have to bring back the coaches to take people. So you have one in the morning and literally 3 in the evening. The same applies, it connects with Port Bell, so that people can use the same service as Port Bell. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for that. And now, Ernest from Safari Share. Back to the question of safety, but in a different way from what we had from State Border. And you deal with a little share. And people can get antsy about getting into a stranger's car. What are you hearing from your clients? So what have you observed as you try to grow this business?
Yes, indeed, as we're trying to grow this business, one of the biggest concerns that we've seen from people is that they want to know if they'll be safe when they share cars with other people. Most of the time, we're trying to link up like people who have never met before to share cars, right? So we found that if a few of the things we're doing that makes people more comfortable is number one, we are taking people's phone numbers and we're verifying them just before they use our applications or just before they use our services. And then also, like both for drivers and passengers, we take their government issued identification, and we also track like all their locations as they are traveling on the app. But then some of the other things we have found that makes people comfortable is like, for example, like we're trying to promote like this kind of carpooling in a very big workplaces, like where people already know each other and they feel that it's safe to travel with people that they already work with or that they work in the same organization with or they come from the same neighborhoods. So those are some of the ways we're trying to address people's fears and perceptions around safety when they share cars.
Right. Thanks for that, Ernest. And now the next question is for, at first it will be for the 4 private enterprises, and then I'll flip it around for Stephen to answer it on the side of the public sector. How, in what ways do you or would you like, I know you are already collaborating and coordinating and trying to have conversations with ministries and city councils and municipality councils, but in what ways do you think what other ways do you think you can collaborate with this public sector in order to grow your business, in order to make public transportation in Kampala or in other cities, administratives, more reliable, safer, and something that everybody can start to gravitate towards? Let me start with Courtesy this time, and then we'll have Andrew, and then Ricky and Alice.
First and foremost, for me, what is quite important is that as stakeholders that have a stake in ensuring that people are able to access social services, that people are able to access affordable transportation, because that is what is important to the person. One is, how do we engage or plan together? Because some areas, myself, I'm a non-profit organization. I'm not looking to make profit, but I'm rather looking to see that even the most vulnerable person is able to access a service. Even the most vulnerable person is able to use public transportation. So one of the things or ways in which we can collaborate, for example, with the public sector, is how do we get involved in the planning processes? How do we bring the citizen opinions in what the technocrats are actually planning? For Ginger City, we have already approached the municipality to identify key areas which we can, as a non-profit organization, contribute to the public sector, like the tourism industry. So we know that a lot of tourists want to cycle around Ginger, but the advantage in this, if the cycling is planned for, even the local person will benefit from it, but also the city or the municipality will benefit from the boost of the tourism sector. So there is a benefit in what I offer and what the public sector offers. So one, we plan together. Two, we implement together. But most importantly, we need to be able to invest in the right infrastructure.
Okay, thank you for that, Courtesy. Andrew, what is your take on how do you make best work with public sector agencies and ministries?
Yeah, thank you, Emma. I think maybe first off, we want to recognize the progress so far that has come from the Ministry of Works and Transport. I think the amendments to the Traffic and Road Safety Act that recognize digital service providers and introduced licensing and regulation was a major step in the right direction, because it basically means that what we're doing, we're in some no man's land, but then there's actually regulation around this, and of course it has its terms and conditions, but then that's a very good step in the right direction. I think more of that is required. I think the government actively engaging organizations that are working to change the city, because ultimately the problem we are solving in some economies is solved by the government, but then of course because of the nature of where we're at as a country, there may be certain gaps, and the different companies here stepping up to fill those gaps. And I think more active engagement with the government in the planning process, even with parastatals like Uganda Railways, and thank you so much for hosting us. These interactions, really make it easier for us to connect with the right people in the right places. Also, I think this legislation around that recognizes digital service providers needs to be communicated across the board, because, for example, you find there's that gap of information in the police. So, for example, like Easy Matatu, the only operator is a bit different, and we are, on the way to get that licensing. But then you find like maybe most of the police are not aware that there's a platform that's using apps to connect transportation minibus taxis. These taxi drivers actually registered, and there's a company that you can go to in regards to these trade drivers. So that gap in knowledge kind of makes it a bit difficult to operate. So, the times you have to make phone calls and even, be summoned to some places to show that, this is a legitimate enterprise, this is a legitimate company, what we're doing is about more than, we're actually solving the problem. So I think, in a nutshell, more active engagement with the startups that are actually solving a crucial problem, because the economy can't grow to a certain level if transportation is not fixed. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Andrew. Ricky, do you have anything to add on the side of motorcycle taxi transportation, and in particular the safe border business?
Thank you, Emma. I think a lot has really been said. I want to say something that no one has said here. The reality is, I think one interesting thing that is true is that people like us in the innovation space, people who have appreciated technology, we've really been able to move very fast and faster than regulation. And the reality is regulators are running after us. And what I would want to see is an enabling environment that allows us to really work together and feel like we're partners, not like small boys who are just doing funny things that needs to be brought back to order. And I think that's the tension that everyone should talk about, because the road safety amendment, I was part of it. We made a number of submissions. There are parts that we did not agree with it. But the fact that also as creators, as innovators, we are also individualistic. Easymatter wants to look at Safe as a competitor. Safari Share wants to look at Easymatter as a competitor and stuff like that. And the reality is, we all making our own individual submissions, and that does not allow us to really succeed. So we also have a responsibility as a team to really have a united voice to be able to work better with government. Because we've been in a number of meetings, especially with the Ministry of Works and Transport, and some of the submissions that were being made were really unfair to the industry, and they were diversionary. And I kept on mentioning this even to the Minister of Transport. Myself, I mentioned it to her that, Honorable Minister, we really want to be your partner. We don't want you to look at us as people that just need to be brought back to order. Because the unfortunate reality is, we know what we're talking about, we know what we want to create, and allow us to make mistakes if we have to, and allow us to report ourselves if we make any mistake, but also support us so that we can see we can see the light of day. An initiative like Safe Border, at the time we started this in around 2015, no one ever thought this idea made any sense. But when people started seeing us crossing borders, going beyond East Africa, now becoming one of the biggest employers in this country, with rising up to become the #1 ride-hailing app for motorcycle taxi in Africa. This is a story, and it's one of the prides. I mean, we are in the part of Africa, and this is the pride of Africa, coming straight from the part of Africa, the most beautiful place that Africa has. So I really think that if government really comes close to us and we work together, and also as creators, as innovators, we come together, I think we can achieve more. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricky. Let's have a brief submission from Safari Share, and then Stephen will give us the other side of the conversation.
Yes. So I do agree that there needs to be like more, I would say more talk between like us startups and the government entities. And I think one of the ways in which we should engage is by data sharing. And this is a two-way thing. I think we need like more data sharing, like between the governments and the startups. Like we as startups, we collect lots of data that I think can be useful, like for the governments as they do that money. And also, I think the government can also like do more to provide like whatever data it has, like their traffic lights. And I think we have air quality sensors in the city, And I think there can be ways in which, like, most data can be made available to startups who are trying to solve these problems. So, like, as a Safaricare, we are basically trying to increase the occupancy of private cars. So, and we think this is an important thing to make the cities a bit greener and even more livable. So, we think that this can be incentivized by governments. I think it's already been done in other countries. There are lanes that are made for cars that have like a certain occupancy, right? And we think that if these kinds of things were introduced in our cities, it would, I think it would incentivize people to like to have higher occupancies in their cars. So those are some of the ways that we think that we could collaborate with our public sector.
Okay. Stephen, what do you think about all that our private enterprises have said?
First of all, I'd like to thank the team here. They are doing a good job for starting. Regulation, what I've noticed, takes a while. And what is the government trying to achieve here, if I may speak on behalf of the government, that to protect your interests, but to protect the interests of the others who may not be part of this market. That's why you find that when Ricky and Andrew are presenting, government is trying to identify the middle. But without a doubt, legislation is always behind innovators. I would like to thank Ministry of Works for creating this environment for discussion, since even referring to, I think, Madame Azuba and the current Minister, General Katuma, have created this environment for discussion. Even Fabio, that's how I first met Fabio. So that is happening. It may be unfortunate that it's slow, but the government is trying to look out for all our interests. As rail, I would also say that I'm in the private sector because I'm doing business. But as I highlighted, the infrastructure, the rolling infrastructure that we have, the locomotives and coaches, haven't changed for a 5-year period. You get my point. What I would have loved as rail to have over 50 coaches, so that I do a scheduled rail service. But it takes time. The cogs of government takes a while. But as a ministry, we are moving in that direction. It may take a while, I agree. But the objective is to make sure that everybody's interests are looked out for. For rail, if you look at the schedule that I've shared, if you look at the platforms at the stations, I like Andrew's team to be present. I would like Ricky's team to be present. So that when the train is like a mothership, bringing 600 or 700 people to a station, then Safe Matatu and the border are distributing the riders. And people are getting getting home in time. They are getting home safely because accidents are submitted over there and the border have taken a toll on the government. But if the partnership is there, we can move government or the transport industry to another level. As rail, we are interested in dealing with it. And I would request that we don't wait for a discussion with the ministry, but I will take it on to get your contact so that we have a discussion as well, how we can partner.
Thank you. Anna?
Yes, so I would like to just, I acknowledge a lot of the comments that have been made about the private sector, and in this room, let's say we're considering rail as part of the private sector, filling that gap. So I think when it comes to transportation planning, we all look to government for guidance, but we're also the innovators. And actually government is looking to us for guidance also. And so I'm going to post a bit of one challenge to you here is that if you look in this room, we have, the rail, we have the private car, we have the minibus, we have the motor, we have the bicycle. These are some of the key modes of transportation in the city. So look at the person on your left or on your right, and I want you to give one idea about how your company, about how your service could work better with that service on your right or on your left. And it's just, you can share a challenge you might have had in working with another mode, but also share an idea you have, a real concrete idea that you could actually implement next week, perhaps, if you had the funding or if you had the coordination. So we're going to start here with Ernest. I'm going to ask you to look to the person on your left and tell us how you could coordinate better with them, given their mode and your mode.
Yes, thank you, Anna. So on our like as Safari Share, like how it works is the people who want rides, they go and they put their like where they're coming from and where they're going, and then they're able to see other drivers who are taking the same route that can take them to their destination. So like we have lots of people who are searching for routes every day, and it far exceeds what we can supply, right? So one of the ways that we can work with Easy Matatu is we can give them some of this demand that we're seeing, which is far exceeding our supply, right? Since they already have pre-planned taxis that are taking pre-planned routes, if someone isn't able to find a private car on our application, we can send them over to Easy Matatu. That's one of the ways in which we can work together.
So, Ernest, you're saying an app, you have almost a shared app or an apps that are coordinated, that if your app is full, then maybe your passenger could find a service there, yeah?
I think it would be more like we could display like some of the routes that they have covered. Like we could display an Easy Matatu. Like when someone searches for a route that is supported by Easy Matatu, we should display among other options that we already have. Like, so it can cover the gap when we don't have any supply for that particular route.
Great. I'm going to move to Ricky now. Ricky, how can your company coordinate better with the other two-wheeled company in the room?
I'll move to something beyond two wheels, because this two wheel is still in Ginger, so we can only talk a lot of business when they expand here. But also, I think there's really need for my sister here to embrace the use of technology, which if we could find out how to work out how we could partner together, especially when our customers leave Kampala and they go for evacuation in India, and they want to book a bicycle ride service. I think this is something that we could easily do with the help of the safe border. When you're in India, you could easily book for a ride with one of our beautiful bicycles. I think that's something that can easily be done. To my friends, all these other gentlemen are doing amazing work. The Safari Share, Easy Matatu, and the big boss from government. Yeah, you're the only big one here. So they're all small. So I really think that if we could find a way of communicating within our systems, or knowing when your customers will be dropped off, or knowing your schedule, like when your customers will be dropped off, we could really be available and avail our drivers and inform them using technology in our app to tell them, look, at this point, there will be lots of people who will require last mile service, and they will be available to help take your passengers home. And I think that's where we come to play this, like where the matatus, where the Safari Shares cannot work, or where the train cannot pass. We can complete that last mile journey. And I think that's an easy win for all of us. If we can know when the train will drop people, when we can know when the Easy Matatu buses or taxis will drop people, we can be there to pick them and then complete the chain. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricky. I'm going to hand it to Ketesi. You have a chance to defend the bicycle here. And I personally, I know that you do have plans for expansion into Kampala, so feel free to talk about that, but also share your vision for how the bicycle could connect and coordinate better with some of these other shared transports. I guess maybe one option, one possibility is even the train. Like questions like, can you bring your bicycle on the train, or is there a place at the station to safely lock the bicycle? So I'll hand it over to you to talk about those issues.
Thank you, Anna. We have over time built a bit of expertise in non-motorized transport on issues of parking space that is favorable, on issues of security for bicycles. So one of the things that I see that as an organization we can contribute to is to offer information on best planning, planning for parking space, possibility of bicycle sharing models within Kampala, which we actually want very much to do in collaboration with the Ministry of Works, of course, putting in consideration of how our bicycles can connect to the major public transport means. But also, in shared mobility, one thing that is important that we've not talked about today is the road user behavior. So when you look at Kampala, for example, maybe Safe Border that is training its riders on road user behavior, a lot of accidents arise as a result of poor behavior on the road, but also not understanding the aspect of shared mobility. Shared mobility is about respecting other modes of transport and understanding that we all have a right to the roads. So one of the things that we can work together is how do we shape the transport sector and the different modes of transport to be able to respect bicycle users. Because a lot of times people think bicycles are outdated or bicycles, but actually bicycles are not outdated. They are good for the environment, they are good for the health, they are good, especially people getting stuck in jam around Kampala. They can make people reach in time to their workplaces. So one of the things that we can do together is how do we make people understand the role of bicycles to our economy, the role of bicycles to our environment, the role of bicycles to our health. So this is one of the aspects that I believe we can actually work together. How do we then help other border riders that are not in safe border to change their behavior, to enable the safety of pedestrians, to enable the safety of cyclists, but also in terms of technology, I totally agree. We need to move away from the manual way of doing things. I'm still stuck there. That's why I don't like PowerPoints, but I mean, I have to kind of move forward to the digital era. So that is something that we can actually take advantage of, that you're already there and you're already doing things. And for the bicycle share program to thrive in Kampala, we need to also adopt that. But also, most importantly, is the technology. Bicycle technology in Uganda is quite challenging. So we have basically the Indian-made bicycles, the Heroes, the city bikes, which are somehow are not very appetizing for our other friends in government. So as an organization, we are trying to see how can we make bicycle technology more attractive. And so we are introducing the electric bicycles. We already have some in Uganda, we've piloted, but now we are introducing them on a more larger scale. So we believe this will make even bicycle technology more attractive and more, user-friendly to those who particularly want to commute to work in the morning. So I'm happy to share information. I'm happy to work with the rest of the people like Izimatatu and the government to see how we can try to connect these transport systems to work together to enable people access services at the end of the day.
Thank you, Getese. I actually do ride a bike in Kampala, and I'm either very brave or very stupid. I'm not sure which one. But I agree with a lot of things Getese said about the need for safe locking and also attitudes of drivers. So there's a cultural change that we need to try to create, and we can't just look to government or the private sector to do that. That's about the society. So Stephen, I'll pass it to you next. If you have specific ideas for how you want to work better with the people in this room, please share.
Thank you, Anna. Without a doubt, first of all, I will invite all of you for a ride on the train, so that you understand what we're talking about. All of you guys.
Can I bring my bike? Can I bike on the train?
That we can discuss. Right? We can find where we can keep the bike.
Okay.
Then going back to the schedule, for example, the train moving in Namambe stops in Nakawa, stops in Kireka, stops in Nambole, and Namama. Those are the points where we can partner, okay? Station self-order teams there. We have to go as far as Ugazi. You see, now, when the trainers drop them in Namambe, yes, we have plans to go up to Mugono. But in the meantime, we can partner. What I would like to highlight that we are going to share details and even have a meeting to that effect. Then we can also share data of you find that of the 600 people using the train to going to Namam, the majority we know very well terminate in Nambole. The majority. Then a small component of around 10% terminate in Namam. This information we can share and we can utilize that. But also on your apps for awareness, we can highlight that these trains, we have a service which terminates at this particular time, which the general population can use. I believe that one can be done within a week or 2 weeks' time. So, number one, visit and use our service. It may not be the best, but it's a journey. We want to walk with you with this journey and get a better understanding. In fact, while on the train, you can even get that idea. And I'd like to wrap it up that the young taxier are the drivers of the economy at the end of the day. We need to partner with you to change the environment we're working in, to change the transport space.
Thank you, Stephen. All right, we'll have just a quick response from the private car company and the taxi company in the room. One way that you can partner better with another mode of transport. Very brief, please.
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, I think all the ideas that have been shared here are excellent ideas, and as an entrepreneur, I think they have a lot of potential. And at this stage, we'll be open to experiment with all these ideas. Personally, I travel with Easy Matatu, then I take a self-border to work, and then in the evening I take a self-border back, and then I connect with an Easy Matatu. And these are things that could happen in a very practical way, where I don't have to switch apps. If I'm organizing my journey, that's something that we want to do. Even with the train, we have routes that go all the way up to Mukono, and so there's room for us to add this to our platform where people who come off the train can continue with an Easy Matatu. So they were definitely open. Definitely, we do not have a lot of bureaucratic processes. So, just one phone call and I'll be on this. Understand? So yeah, we look forward to that. Thank you.
Yeah, I have to agree with Mr. Andrew here. Quite a few interesting ideas that he brought up. I had a thought as Ms. KTC was speaking about bicycles. Did you know that when you ride a bicycle in the city right now, like the health benefits that you would attain, like from riding a bicycle, are wiped out by all the pollution that we have. So, like one way in which we are, I would say one way in which we are working to make bicycle riding a bit healthier in the city is to try and reduce on the number of cars. And I think we can work together. I think it is both in terms of like your health and in terms of safety. Like I think the more cars that we have on the roads, the less safety it is, especially with our infrastructure, right? So I think that if we find ways to reduce the number of cars, we'll make it safer for people to ride bicycles, like in our city. Yeah, and then also like something to do with the railways. I know lots of people use railways, but even when they have them cars, right?
Right.
Yes. So like, let's say I'm coming from Center, I park my car over there, but then there's someone else who is coming back from Center, and they park their car inside. And I think there's a chance that there's a good number of people who are driving cars empty from when they leave the train station. And I think there's also a good chance that there's people on that train who are going the same way as those who are driving. Right? So I think if we can link up these people so that they don't have to take like separate means and then even there's like separate costs for those different modes of transport that you're using, and instead share a car. It would be like better for their pockets and for the environment, right? So I think there's a lot we can do together to make it. I think to make it all make sense, right? Like to reduce people's costs, to make transport like more enjoyable and more comfortable for people. Yeah, so I look forward to talking to you all and discussing on how we can work together. Thank you.
Okay, that was a very interesting exercise, let's say. We are over a year now, we've all been in this, Stephen talks a bit about it and how it's affected him in this pandemic period, COVID-19. I know that it must have come with particular challenges for all of you, but right now I would like you to talk a little bit about some of the opportunities that might have been brought to the fore by that, this particular situation of COVID-19. Let me start with Stephen, since as he was said, he's the big person in the group.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. COVID-19 is an oxymoron for rail. Why do I say that? Sweet bitterness. There's been a lot of publicity for rail. His Excellency, the President of late, whenever he makes an announcement, there is a component of rail. It has emphasized and amplified rail as an essential service. It has also, because of that development, seen release of resources in the direction of rail. Mobility, which is under passenger services in rail is never profitable. There are very few cases. But for you to make sense for passenger services, you have to ride off freight. And if you see the service we are running it because it's in the corridor of haulage of freight. I'm glad to inform you that currently we have some big projects that are happening. There is a rehabilitation of Malaba-Kampala line, meter gauge, which connects to Malaba, Nairobi, Mombasa. There is a meter gauge line running all through. But with the advent of standard gauge, there is now a connectivity in Naivasha, Nakuru, where you can take standard gauge up to Naivasha and then you use meter gauge and bring up. So that is a space we operate in. It's a project that has been approved. We are in a final discussion. This is something close to 330 million euros project. The same has helped with the Tororo Gulu project, rehabilitation of data gauge once again. This is being funded by EU, and the contractor is on ground. So if you have that infrastructure in place, passenger services will come on board. We have a Gulu logistics hub connecting, that is freight, connecting freight, but it's a big project which is being funded by KMEA, EU, DFID. Those are the projects that are ongoing. On top of that, we have MV Pamba being rehabilitated. We have 2 vessels that fly Mwanza, Port Belgium. We also, during COVID, we opened up a route to Kisumu, transporting fuel, diesel, majorly. So those are the projects that are ongoing. I got a chance to take a ride to Mwanza on the ship, and I realized this is a potential, a big potential that we need to, space we need to work on. Because of COVID, now other projects have come on board. There's consideration of Gulu Papach line rehabilitation. A feasibility study is about to start. There is also consideration of Kampala Shared line. Oh, that is mitigated, connecting with movement of cargo. But after the line has been made and it's safe enough, passenger service can be brought on board. So that is the space we are working in. And probably, what was the question? I just wanted, I was given another project, but I need to zero down on the exact issue at hand.
You were just trying to spell out the opportunities that have been offered by the pandemic.
Okay, the pandemic. So that also, coming back to the pandemic, we ended up reducing the numbers. So for a coach which has 150, we for social distancing we are doing 75. It also came with a big issue that we had to raise the rate, the fare. However, we as rail, we are a business entity. We are not supposed to run any service where we make losses. So that also kicked in.
Can you tell us, Stephen, how much is the fare to ride the rail?
Oh, for Kampala Port Bell, it's 1,000 shillings.
And how much is that in USD?
It's
30 cents.
30 cents.
30 cents, okay.
Yeah, 30 cents. Then on Kampala Namambe, it's 2,000.
Okay.
So 60 cents.
Okay.
Yes, for 12-kilometer distance and 6 kilometers.
Very affordable, even for people, locally, I think.
Yes. The objective of rail may not be financial, but economic. The advantages you get out of people getting on time at their workplaces, productivity increases, the issue of safety, the accidents that we have been talking about, we have a very safe environment, but also somebody has money that you can leave, take home when you are using the rail service.
Okay. Thank you so much for that, Stephen. We see quite a lot is being done, and we hope that it shall come to fruition. Can we have...
Probably on that, I need to highlight that the projects I talked about first are already ongoing. For example, Tororo Gulu by 2024 should be up and running. The one for Kampala Malaba is a 3-year. MV Pamba, the ship is on the dock, the engines are being changed. So within 3 months' time, it should be functional. So if I would answer that directly, that one is already good.
So, but you're saying COVID gave you the opportunity to do some internal planning and expand. You had time to focus on your operations and future plans. Is that what you're saying?
Correct, but also the release of funds into rail. Even now, it has been amplified as an essential service.
Great.
Kicked in. Probably one more thing I may have to say, I have a lot on rail. If you look at the challenge we are facing at the border, where the trucks parking and they have to be tested, for a train pulling 22 wagons, which could be 44 trucks, you need 3 people to cross. You just have to change the locomotive. So only 3 people versus the 44 which will come with trucks. That is the advantage of rail.
Okay, let's just have a submission from courtesy, because I know that during the COVID-19, NMT and the need for NMT was really brought to the fore. So please say a little bit about that.
Yes, I think one and most important aspect for me was the recognition of how beautiful and accessible cities can be with less cuts. So during COVID-19, cities were a bit freer. There were not so many private cars going into the city. The taxis were not working, so the cities were more attractive, more accessible for even the most vulnerable person. So that was one thing. And I think also that has changed attitudes of people towards cycling. Because during COVID-19, people had to embrace cycling, especially women. I mean, that for me was a plus. I've seen so many women that have come to Fabio. They want a bicycle, they want to use it for different reasons. So this was an eye-opener to so many people on how bicycles can be affordable, how bicycles can be cheap, and how bicycles can be also safe and protect people even from the spread of COVID-19. So I'm happy to say that the fact that His Excellency, the President of Uganda, kept saying in each of the COVID-19 address, he kept mentioning that people need to embrace cycling. People need to use bicycles more. We don't want to see people going into public transport to be seen. So there was also a recognition from even the policymakers, for example, in Jinja City, because of this, these addresses, the technocrats, the policymakers, they have also started appreciating the need for planning for cycling and also the need to invest in this infrastructure. And we are riding on that as an organization to keep advocating for safer spaces, to keep advocating for affordable transport and investment in the motorized transport. But also awareness for non-motorized transport really was amplified. So we got quite a number of media houses coming to us to talk more about cycling. What does this mean to the economy? What does this mean to the safety? So we got this opportunity to kind of amplify the need for non-motorized transport planning. So, so to say, as an organization, for me, COVID-19 was an opportunity for people to see how much they can save actually if they move from motorized transport and use more of the non-motorized transport. Because initially, many people thought they could not walk, they could not cycle, but COVID-19 actually was an eye-opener that they can cycle, they can move, and they can actually spend less on transport and save more incomes for themselves. So we are taking the possibility to keep the voice out, to advocate for safer infrastructure.
Thank you, Katefi. And I think this is a trend we saw in cities around the world. WRI works in over 100 cities around the world, and every city saw an uptake in cycling and walking during the pandemic. So we hope that this interest and also an awareness of pollution and safety stay with companies and city governments even beyond the pandemic. We unfortunately have just 2 minutes before we get kicked off the air by our friends in Ghent. So I wanted to take this time to focus on our painting, and maybe we direct our last question to Joshua here. If we can put the camera on the painting, yeah, great. So Joshua, can you just tell us a little bit about what you're painting here and how it relates to what's being said in the room, please?
Okay, I goes by the name of Joshua. I'm the one behind the painting. In here, I'm looking at for mobility means of transport. Like this street, show me this is Kampala Road. Yeah, Kampala Road. If you see my parent house and stuff. So my parent house. So this place, I'm looking at cars are not allowed in this lane, and then there is a bus coming on this side where passengers can come and board from here, and I have a guy here who is ordering for his border, and then I have this other one who is just from taking a ride, with the border, and it's okay going towards the other side of the railway because there's going to be a railway post here going to train terminals. And then this one, the guy is kidding, going towards the train, going to board the train. And then this one is trying to talk to the border and showing him where I'm going, that's heading the other side. And then we have here motorcycle. No, we have a bicycle. Guys riding freely without any hindrance because this lane is free of cars. And then here we had bicycle stands where people come and park their bicycles. And also in the same place we have where people come and wait as they order for their buses and wait for their buses. Also what I'm looking at, the road signage. Here is more walkable. It's more walkable than this other side of the other road, even the side of the road. So that's why you see there is a zebra here, and basically here is only for bikes and pedestrians, right? So also when I was putting in this one, there was one thing I was looking at, that it is still cool to take a border or get a ride without necessarily having your own car. So I was trying to put an impression that it's still cool to take a border. Yeah.
Thank you, Joshua. This concludes our studio session here in Kampala, and we want to thank Shared Mobility Rocks for starting this conversation, for getting us in the room together. But we also don't want this to be the end of this conversation. And so I think being here today, we see there's many paths forward. And I would, WRI and everyone in the room would like to keep having these phone calls and meetings and even action. So what are we doing physically to make the things we're talking about a reality, and how are they actually implemented, and how do we partner better with government and with each other in the room? So we give a big thank you, and we agree that shared mobility does rock. It's cool, it's trendy, and for sustainable cities going forward, it's the only way. So we thank everyone, and I thank you, Emma, and all of the panelists, and the big man in the room. Thank you, Steve.
I just wanted to make one comment on the paving. We need to include a helipad somewhere, so that intermodal transport is better for.
The drone, you mean the drones?
A helipad. For example, helicopters can land and people can get into the city.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ghent. Thank you. The U.S., Mumbai. I think Sao Paulo. All of the other cities that have been online doing this for the last 24 hours. So goodbye from Kampala.
Thank you very much. For the very fantastic session.
Shared mobility rocks. Shared mobility rocks. Shared mobility rocks. Shared mobility rocks. Woo!